welcome to Season 2 of the Discovery Pod with Eve. We've got an exciting show today with a true legend, Bob Gale, the mastermind behind Back to the Future, the musical. We'll dive into Bob's background in a few minutes. But I'm joined today by my co-host, Tony Blass, who's an actor, producer. Tony, welcome to the Discovery Pod with Eve. Oh, and folks, please make sure you watch this episode to hear about Bob's musical opening November 5th at the Pantages through December 1st in Hollywood. So watch this episode on the Discovery Pod with Eve's YouTube channel, or you can listen to us on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Amazon, or your favorite podcast. So please watch this episode on Thursday, October 10th at 12 p.m. Pacific time. Tony, welcome to the second season of the Discovery Pod with Eve. It's so good to have you back.
Yay, I'm so excited to be back. And I have to say, I'm very excited about our first guest. I'm a Back to the Future fanatic.
Who isn't?
I mean, who isn't, right? But my daughter and nephew...
The DeLorean?
The DeLorean, but they would watch the home videos 1, 2, and 3, and then they'd go to, well, we're just going to watch 1 again, and then be 2, 3, and then 1 again, until we finally had to put them off to bed. I remember the night that second one came out. It was a raining Thanksgiving night, and we asked the family if we could please leave because my brother-in-law was totally into it. We drove through the driving rain up to Hill Valley, Universal Studios City Walk, to see it there.
Oh, my God.
And I have to tell you, I don't know if it's everybody's favorite movie, but for me, it's the science behind it, the science fiction,
and
that alternate reality, the story
behind it, right?
Oh,
how
so
he started
exciting.
writing. But not only that, did you know that the script got rejected 42 times? Did you know that?
No.
Like, incredible.
Are there 42 studios?
He didn't give up. So he kept believing in the story, and he made it happen. Fun fact, did you know it grossed $1.8 billion in today's money? Like, wow. Woo. Incredible, right? Oh, my God. Fantastic.
Amazing.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are so excited to welcome a true legend in the world of film and storytelling. Bob Gale, the mastermind behind the iconic franchise Back to the Future, and now the mastermind behind the musical, the Back to the Future, which is set to open here in Hollywood at the Pantages on November 5th through December 1st. So please make sure you get your tickets. Watch this episode, the premiere episode of the Discovery Pod with Eve on the Discovery Pod with Eve's YouTube channel, or you can listen to us on your favorite podcast. Without further ado, welcome Bob to the Discovery Pod with Eve. We are so excited to have you with us today.
Thank you, Eve. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. Okay, I gotta give a shout out to Bob Zemeckis because who co-wrote and co-created the franchise with me, because I can't take total credit for everything without he deserves a lot of credit for a lot of stuff, and we worked on these projects as a team, and so.
It's incredible.
Let's get started.
Yes, let's get started.
Yeah.
Yay. Tony, kick it off.
Okay. So there's so many things to ask you, but I want to start at the beginning of the musical. It opened, I believe, in February in Manchester. 2020, before it was supposed to go to the West End. And then it closed because of COVID, right?
Exactly. That's right.
And so can you just walk us through how you survived that long period of time and how you kept the strength to go forward and how did you get it back on stage and on track?
Well, the plan had been that we would play in Manchester for 12 weeks, and then the idea of putting a show on in Manchester was to get to the West End in London, and that's how you do it. It's like here to get a show on Broadway, you might start it in New Haven or Chicago or Philadelphia or some other place where the theater owners could see the show with an audience. So that was why we were in Manchester to begin with. Our lead producer, Colin Ingram, is British, and he had experience doing it this way. So that's where that part of it started. And while we were in previews, we started hearing about this rising panic about coronavirus, which was far worse of a panic in the United States than it was in the UK.
Yeah.
I would talk to my wife on the phone, and she would be nervous and scared and all this, and I'm saying, "What are you talking about?" Because they weren't turning it into a disaster scenario over there yet. But then once things started getting crazy, we had our opening night in Manchester, and we were successful in getting a theater booked for London.
Wow.
But then 4 or 5 nights later, the British government, like the US government and everybody else, decided they were shutting everything down, including theater. And of course, we were all devastated. When we first heard that this was imminent, Trump had made a statement saying that he was going to close all the airports to traffic from overseas. So it was a scramble for all the Americans that were over there to try to get ourselves back. It turned out it was a little bit overstated, but nevertheless, it was panic time.
Yeah.
And the thing is that never before in the UK, and I don't think on Broadway either, had the theaters all been shut down. Even during World War II in London, the theaters were putting shows on. They thought this would be good for morale, and people, the citizens of London, could go to the theater.
Wow.
So this was unprecedented, and nobody knew how long this was going to take. First maybe this is just a momentary thing, and 2 or 3 weeks later we'll be up. But our producer Collins thought, no, this is a bigger deal than that.
Wow.
And we had to cancel the rest of our projected run in Manchester, because he knew that even if they lifted it to get everything up and running, our dates would have expired. So this was the one thing that kept us going, was knowing that nobody was going to go off and take another job in theater, because there were no other jobs.
Yeah. It was
we didn't have to worry about losing any members of our cast, because we had cast members getting jobs working in grocery stores during this. And it was just like everything else in America and the world. It was just a big question mark, a big unknown. And all we could do was keep our fingers crossed and say our prayers and hope for the best.
Congratulations, Bob, on the opening here in Hollywood at the Pantages on November 5th. So what's been the most exciting part of adapting this iconic movie for stage?
Excuse me. It's been wonderful, because all the people that are working on the show signed on because they love the movie. Excuse me. Not enough coffee or too much coffee, or I'm not sure which. But the love that people have for the movie, they brought to the stage. And the interesting thing is our creative team, production design, choreographer, lighting guy, video guy, sound guy, all British.
Wow.
And of course, well, that makes sense, because that's where we That's where we started the show. And in the UK, on Boxing Day, which is the day after Christmas, they had a tradition of always running Back to the Future on one of the TV stations, kind of like the way they would run The Wizard of Oz here in the States the day after Thanksgiving. So we had a very knowledgeable audience familiar with the property, and that was another good reason for opening the show over there.
Wonderful.
So, when did you open it on Broadway?
We opened on Broadway in July of 2023. Actually, June 30th, I think, was our first preview date. And then we had our big gala for the Michael J. Fox Foundation on July the 25th, 2023.
Recently, the Marty McFly on Broadway has become something of, I believe, it's sort of a first-time phenomenon. He's sort of like a teen idol from Broadway. He was just on Teen Vogue this month.
Wow.
So this is a very, I think his name is Casey Likes. So obviously
Casey
you
Likes,
guys
yes.
did a great job on the casting.
Yeah.
So how did you find the American cast, and what have been the challenges in translating from the film to the stage cast?
Well, that's all right. Let me answer the first part of the question
Oh, okay,
first.
sorry. Two parts.
Too many.
Roger
parts.
Bart plays Doc Brown, and he was cast for the show in the UK. So he'd already been with the show, and he, of course, he wanted to play Doc Brown on Broadway. So that was easy enough. And we found Casey because he was in an adaptation, a musical adaptation of Almost Famous, which was rather short-lived. Bad for that show, but good for us because we had people see him in that and say, "Oh, this kid's perfect for Marty McFly," but are we going to be able to get him out of this show? And as long as the show was running, he wasn't even going to be entertaining the idea of doing something else. But then they announced that the show was going to close, and then suddenly we had him. And then the rest of the casting was pretty much, the way you cast any show. We had a casting director. They brought people in. We saw them. The guy who played George McFly, who's not on Broadway anymore, he was just with us for the first year. Hugh Coles, he also had been with the show in the UK. He was British, but he was so great that he was the one guy we brought over.
Wow.
But that was it. Everybody that was in the cast on Broadway, again, they took their love of the movie and brought it with them. And in terms of the challenges, how do you translate a movie so well known and so beloved and do it right?
Yep.
One of the rules that I had when I was trying to figure this all out was that it wasn't going to be a slavish adaptation of the movie, because if it was, then you could just stay home and just watch the movie. And we didn't want to try to do stuff on stage that we knew we couldn't do well.
Yeah.
So you're not going to see the skateboard chase, because that was just too dangerous of a thing to try to attempt. You're not going to see the Libyan terrorists because we couldn't do a car chase or have gunfire on the stage. We couldn't do Einstein the dog because it's just too difficult to have a dog on stage. So there were not a whole litany, but quite a number of things where I just said, let's come up with some other reason why Doc Brown is incapacitated and Marty has to get into the DeLorean and drive 88, things like that. And at the same time, I was going through it and saying, okay, we got to have this and we got to have that. Obviously, we have to have the DeLorean.
Yeah.
It has to go 88 miles per hour. And interestingly, if this had started off as theater, that's an idea that would have never occurred to us, because how are you going to do that on a stage? I'm not going to tell you how we do it, but we pull it off. And there is a actual DeLorean on stage.
Wow.
It's a replica. It's not It's not stainless steel; it's a fiberglass thing that we built, but it's a real vehicle that's on the stage, and we have a clock tower. We have the lightning on the clock tower sequence, all that stuff, some of these key moments that you remember from the movie. We knew we had to do them, and I didn't know how we were going to do some of this stuff. But our director, John Rando, he has a great management style, which is hire the best people you can find and get out of their way. And they pull it off.
That's incredible. So working on the musical, did it offer any new perspectives or reflections on the original film?
Absolutely. One of the things that we had fun doing was when we made the movie, and we shot it in 1984, 1985, the 50s were 30 years ago. So we had a historic / nostalgic view of the 50s. So now we're looking back at the 80s from even a longer view. So when you see the ensemble do the opening number, dressed in all this 80s wardrobe, wearing these 80s wigs, you're kind of saying, "Oh my God, did we really look like that in 1985?" Of course, we turned the volume up on it a bit, but yeah. And then there's some other things that we were able to have fun with. To say, okay, this, here in LA, we have advertisements on bus benches. So we have a bus bench advertising video rentals, which were, at the time, that was just a normal thing in the 80s. And now suddenly we look back on that and say, wait, what? They rented videos? So there are a number of things like that. Plus, we have some Easter eggs.
Wow.
If you're a big fan of the movies, you'll see some things that you will only appreciate if you're a big fan.
Yeah.
But if you're not, if we've had people who've never even seen the movie see the show, and they totally understand. They have no problem with it. And I've even had people come up to me and say, "I'm glad I didn't see the movie before I saw the show because I didn't even know what was going to happen."
Nice. Well, I'm kind of going on that sort of thought about adapting the story. Of course, we've all, especially superfans, know about the trials and tribulations that you all went through with the story, and some concerns about aspects of the story that might be maybe too adult themed or whatever for a children or a family movie and so forth back in those days. But I think that theater would allow you a little more freedom. Is that the right thing to say about with the kind of more sensitive aspects of the story?
There's some people that find the mother-son thing disturbing.
Yeah.
But back in the day when the movie came out, nobody really had a problem with that, and nobody has a problem with it on stage because everybody understands that Lorraine doesn't know who Marty is. Mm-hmm. So she just thinks he's this really cute, cool guy. He knows, and he's always trying to get away from her. So that kind of takes the taboo aspect out of it. Yeah. We did take out the most of the profanity. So there's a few hells and damns, but that's about it. So I would say that if you want to bring your kids, I would say 7 or 8 years old is kind of the cutoff. They're younger than that, they probably won't understand a lot of stuff. But if they're that age, and you don't mind them hearing damn and hell, which I'm sure they know all the other words to, you won't have a problem with you. They'll have a great time. And you say the show has just a tremendous amount of spectacle, and it really is. Bob Zemeckis and I and our team, we all said, let's kind of look at the classic musicals or classic type of Rodgers and Hammerstein type musical, and update some of the technical stuff. But that, to me, is what a great musical should be.
Yeah.
Is what they were doing in the quote unquote golden age of musical theater.
So to piggyback on that question, what challenges did you, or how did you adapt the emotional beats from the film for a theater audience, and what challenges did you face?
One of the things that we learned is that one of the usages of song is for exactly for that emotional aspect. A song can be the equivalent of a soliloquy in a play or a close-up in a movie, where you get inside of a character's head. It kind of often can stop time. So there are places, there's one number in Act Two, which is just wonderful, where Doc Brown sings a song called For the Dreamers, where we really get inside of his head. It's just him singing the song. There's no dancing. There's no choreography. There's no pyrotechnics. He's just singing about what's in his heart. And it's very powerful. And the audience really gets into it. And, we were blessed with the great songwriting team of Glenn Ballard, who lives right down the Hollywood Boulevard from the Pantages.
Wow.
He's won 6 or 7 Grammy Awards. He's written songs for everybody from Michael Jackson to Alanis Morissette to you name it. He's probably written for him.
Wow.
And of course, our film composer, Alan Silvestri, and these guys worked together on Polar Express with Bob Zemeckis. So Bob said, we got to get Glenn on this show. And these guys got along with us so well. When the first day I met Glenn, I felt like I'd known him my whole life.
Wow.
And part of this was teamwork, was all of us being able to be in a room and say, okay, this is a good place for a song. This should be this should be that. We'd hear a demo, and we might say, maybe you should accent this, or you shouldn't say this. And then they're looking at the song and saying, Bob, can you write something that helps set the song up a little bit better than it is now? So it was a lot of give and take, and it worked out wonderfully.
So, what was your inspiration for the time travel aspect? What things, from your childhood or young adulthood inspired you not only in the time travel as a, sort of more straight ahead concept, but also in the alternate timelines where things progress differently based on the choices or opportunities that people had?
Right. When I was, I guess, 9 years old, I saw the George Pal version of The Time Machine with Rod Taylor, and it pretty much made my head explode. This was really my first exposure to the whole concept of time travel, and I especially enjoyed the first section of time travel where the character travels just a little bit forward in time, just a few years, and sees things that he knows and how they've changed. That was a lot more powerful for me than the stuff with the Morlocks later on. Then, of course, I discovered the Twilight Zone, and they did time travel episodes on that. I discovered the greatness of Ray Bradbury, who wrote one of the greatest time travel stories ever, The Sound of Thunder, which gave us the butterfly effect idea. And then as I moved into high school and college, I just became a voracious reader of science fiction, and I always gravitated towards time travel. The idea that things could change, that was always something that the fathers and parents of time travel always came up with these thoughts. And it really goes back to Charles Dickens in The Christmas Carol, because Scrooge gets a chance to see what the future is going to be like if things continue the way that they are, and he doesn't like it.
Yeah.
And Bob Zemeckis and I always felt that Christmas Carol is kind of really the first time travel story.
Yeah.
And then that concept, of course, got developed in a different way with Frank Capra's It's a Wonderful Life,
Yep.
where Jimmy Stewart character, George Bailey, gets to see what the world would be like if he hadn't been born in that alternate timeline. And then, of course, this is just something that all of us think about all the time. You know, what if I had gone out with, Leslie instead of Sam?
Yeah.
What if I had gone to State University instead of a private school?
Mm-hmm.
What if I had done this? What if I had taken that job instead of that? We usually don't think about what would have happened if I had put on a red shirt instead of a blue one today. But there are key decisions that we think back on in our lives where we say, okay, that was kind of a turning point, and what would my life have been like had that not happened?
Yeah.
And of course, the interesting thing about Back to the Future is that the story of the making of the movie is also the story of the movie, because we shot the movie for 5.5 weeks with Eric Stoltz, and then decided it wasn't working, and we replaced him. So those of us who were involved there, we got to see kind of an alternate timeline of what Back to the Future would have been like without Michael J. Fox in it.
Yeah, that's incredible. So just knowing how, based on all the research I did, and you pitched this idea 42 times to the studios, and they kept rejecting it. A lot of people would have given up and said, you know what, to hell with it. But you never gave up. So what kept you motivated? I know it's a great story, but what really just kept that?
Well, yeah, that
fuel?
was it, Eve. Really, it's a great story. And the reason most of the time that we were rejected, because people say, how could they reject a script like that?
Yeah. 42 times.
That we heard over and over again, time travel movies don't make any money. And that was basically a true statement back then.
Yeah.
There hadn't been a giant hit movie with the time travel theme. So we couldn't argue with a studio executive or a producer that would say, well, yeah, it's a good script. And lots of people told us that they thought the script was very, very good. In fact, one of the producers that we got involved with to try to help us set it up was a guy named Joe Roth, who ended up running Disney many, many years later. So there were people that really liked the script, including Steven Spielberg.
Wow.
We didn't go back into business with Steven because Bob Zemeckis and I had made 3 pictures with Steven, and none of them had done well at the box office. And we were concerned that if we did another picture with Steven and it tanked, that we might not ever work again.
Yeah.
And we told that to Steven, and he said, yeah, you guys are probably right. So what actually got the movie made was Bob Zemeckis was getting cabin fever about not being able to direct anything.
Wow.
And he took a project called Romancing the Stone, turned it into a wonderful movie. It was a big hit. And then suddenly everybody wanted to be in business with Bob Zemeckis.
Incredible.
What's your next movie, Bob? We want it. We want it. We want it.
Wow.
And so we went back to Steven, who had just set up Amblin Entertainment, because we knew Steven. We liked working with Steven, and we knew that he believed in it and supported it from the very beginning. So it seemed like this would be a perfect fit, especially having now made E.T., and this fitting the, family film image of Steven Spielberg.
Incredible. So if knowing how much you've achieved from the franchise and now, of course, the musical, if you could give yourself, your younger self, one piece of advice about navigating the film industry, what would it be?
Well, the lesson of Back to the Future Part 2 is try not to interfere for your own personal gain in the events of the past. So knowing what I know, how everything turned out, I wouldn't change anything really.
Yeah.
I think it all worked out pretty well. So
I bet it did.
You wouldn't want to end up in an alternate 2024 where
no,
Eric Stoltz had been the lead or whatever. And we all know that he's an amazing actor and went on that very year to be acclaimed in Mask, and he had been in A Wildlife.
Mask had actually preceded it. That's why we gave him a shot, because we thought, okay, if he could act this well with all those prosthetics on, maybe he's our guy.
So I just read an article with Leah Thompson from this month, and she was talking about how she had to warm up to Michael J. Fox because she was in Wildlife with Eric Stoltz, and then he got fired, and her view in the mid-'80s was that a television actor was a television actor and a film actor was something different. So, what's interesting to me is that she talked about, he talked about the bedroom scene, which is one of the early ones that you guys did, and she maybe wasn't fully on board with him yet or ready to really fully embrace him. And so he said that she was giving him this real stare, this, just like really challenging look the whole time he was, and it really made him uncomfortable. And it kind of informed the that initial meeting scene. So I was just wondering if you thought how the challenge of changing an actor in that situation, and how he had to work to adapt to the whole new cast.
There was back then, as you say, Tony, there was a real dichotomy between a TV actor and a movie actor.
Yeah.
And there was kind of a hierarchy.
Yep.
Where, for whatever reason, people that were in film thought that television was beneath them,
Mm-hmm.
and that you end up on television because you couldn't get the primo job in feature films. And I guess there's some history about that, where you'd say, okay, if you're going to take the lead on a TV show, which is a gigantic commitment, that puts you off the market for movies. Somehow Christopher Lloyd managed to avoid that stigma because he'd already done movies, and then he was on Taxi. It's interesting that he got away from that. But yeah, it didn't take that long in my memory for Leah and for everybody else to warm up to Michael and realize, hey, this kid's really, really talented.
Yeah.
With the crew, it was instantaneous.
Wow.
Because the first night that Michael came to work, and this is actually, people ask me, what's my favorite memory of shooting Back to the Future? That's it. When Michael came to work at Twin Pines Mall, for the first night that he worked, and we had just shot these same exact scenes with Eric Stoltz the week before. Suddenly, everybody breathed this gigantic sigh of relief when we saw Michael's interpretation of this character.
Yeah.
And everybody said, that's it.
Wow.
He's the guy. That's Marty McFly.
That's amazing.
So it just, his charm, his talent, his ability, it won everybody over. And Leah, I think Leah's discomfort with that probably didn't last more than that very first day, because she could feel how much she was getting back from him.
Were you concerned, not so much concerned about his talent, because he's such an amazing, gifted actor, but, he was doing a TV show. So obviously he was doing working double, like how many hours from Family Ties, and he would come on set. Were you worried about his ability to live up to that role, that role? Not from his acting, but just knowing how long.
Just because he would be exhausted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somehow that really didn't enter our minds.
Okay.
I don't know why.
Wow.
We
He
were
was
just
the
so
guy.
happy to have him.
Wow.
We were so happy to have him because he'd been our original first choice, and we couldn't get him off of the show back when we made our first inquiries in August of 1984. And then by January of 1985, we were able to make this accommodation.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was strenuous for him. It was strenuous for the crew.
Yep.
But Bob Zemeckis is so talented and had such a good vision of what he wanted that he was able to just juggle these balls, and we would shoot the master shot of, for example, the dinner table scene in the McFly house in 1985. We shot the master shot of that on stage 12 at Universal. Was the last shot we did one night when we were going to lose Michael, and the crew had to wrap, so that we could shoot all the coverage without Michael the next day. And if you watch that scene again, you will notice that Michael's sitting on one side of the table and his siblings are sitting on the opposite side of the table, so that we could cover them, and we could cover Lorraine and George without having him there. But because we shot the master shot, we knew exactly Bob knew exactly what he needed.
Incredible.
So, throughout your career, is there a behind-the-scenes story or production moment that still brings a smile to your face?
Oh.
Wow. There's a lot of them, actually. Certainly the very first day of shooting our very first movie, I Want to Hold Your Hand, when Bob Zemeckis and I stepped out onto our location in Pasadena. It was on Colorado Boulevard. We took a empty storefront, turned it into a record store, and we just kind of said, "Oh my God, look at all these people who are here because of some stuff that we wrote." It was look at all these trucks.
Yeah.
Look at all this stuff. That is kind of a humbling experience.
Incredible. So tell us about, you grew up in St. Louis. How did that experience influence your storytelling approach?
Well, growing up in St. Louis, I don't think was necessary to my storytelling approach, other than the story of the origin of Back to the Future, which all the fans already know that story, but I'll tell it later anyway. It was still, I just loved stories. I loved movies. My parents loved the movies. They loved musical theater. They were always going to the movies once or twice a week, really.
Yeah.
And then that love of movies, they would take my brothers and me to the movies to see Disney movies and other things that were family oriented or musicals, Sound of Music, My Fair Lady, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had, I'd say the Twilight Zone was a gigantic influence. I grew up on comic books. I loved the fantasy aspect of Superman and Batman, and then later the Marvel Universe. And when I started with creative writing, even in grade school, I loved coming up with stories.
Wow.
And we would have to read our stories to the class. And I soon discovered that my peers in third grade and fourth grade, they really got excited when I got up to tell another story. So I thought, I like this.
Incredible.
I like this a lot.
So, despite the trilogy's success, you chose not to go beyond the 3 films. Why did you decide to sort of hold it just to the 3 and leave it as just a trilogy?
Because we have standards, Tony.
Good for you.
That's a great answer,
Good for you.
Bob. We are at the 3-minute mark. So the last question is, if you could have dinner with anyone dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Mark Twain.
Wow.
That's, and it's obvious why.
Of course. Bob, it's been incredible to have you, legend. I cannot wait to go see, Back to the Future, the musical at the Fantasias. I mean, your body of work just speaks for itself. What an honor to have you. And I know everyone is going to be excited to go and see the musical. I'm going to go get a ticket.
Me too.
I'm like,
right away,
I'm getting a ticket. Bob, thank
you. If you want to forget all about Election Day, that's when we open. If you want to watch Election
I
Returns,
like that, Bob.
Come to the Pantages and see us.
Amazing. Bob, you are a true legend. Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to seeing the musical on November 5th. But of course, it's at the Pantages from November 5th through December 1st. And Bob, all the best. Nice talking to you.
Thanks for having me on your show.
Thank you. Tony,
Thank you, Tony.
What an incredible honor to have a legend be with us.
Absolutely.
Incredible. Oh my gosh.
And I'm so glad he reminded me that it's Election Day, because I want to go back to any future that isn't 2024 on that day. So
of course.
I will be going to that musical.
And of course, for our listeners, please make sure you get tickets to see Bob's new musical, the Back to the Future musical at the Fantasias here in Hollywood, November 5th through December 1st. Bob is also on Twitter. He's on Instagram. And Bob, where else are you available?
No, I'm not.
Okay, he's not on social media, but
I'm just here.
Thank you so much. What an honor it's been to have such a true legend. Folks, please watch this episode on the Discovery Pod with Eve's YouTube channel, or you could listen to us on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Amazon, or wherever podcast is available. This has been a true and honor to have such a legend with us. So please watch this episode to hear all about Bob's upcoming musical, Back to the Future, the musical. Thanks everyone for watching. Thank you, Roger Neal, for doing an amazing job booking the guests. Thanks again, Bob. It's been an honor having you on the show. Thanks everyone, and see you next week. Listen to us 12 p.m. Pacific on October 10th to watch this episode with Bob Gale, the legend.